Thanks for staying so late this afternoon. My name is Bob Newkirk. I'm the head of strategy and partnerships at Tourmaline Labs. Show of hands, who has been in a car accident, had a family member in a car accident, or a close friend in a car accident? Okay, that's 90% of the crowd. Anybody that has not been in a car accident, you are beating the statistics that the insurance industry has put out that says every 17 to 18 years on average in the US, we're going to have a car accident. So how many people, by show of hands, know someone that's died in a car accident? Okay, a few hands came up. Sadly, I've had two friends have been lost in car accidents. It's completely heartbreaking. And unfortunately, again, as you go through your life, statistics say you'll probably know someone that dies by a car accident. So what I'm about to share is a bit graphic. It may be a bit disturbing or upsetting, but that is done on purpose because it's to represent the harsh reality, and it's based on the statistics of the advanced society that we live here in the United States. And we certainly have a significant problem. Here in the United States, we have over 5 million accidents per year. And in 2015, this was going up at the most increased rate it has in the last 50 years. And unfortunately, this statistic of 15 to 28-year-olds dying in car crashes is the #1 cause of death. Has not changed since the time I was a teenager, which I hate to admit it, but that was many decades ago. And this statistic really caught me by surprise. Even after driving for 10 years, drivers the ages of young 30s, young adults, still the #2 cause of death is car accidents. And of course, also passengers, 2 to 14-year-olds, the #2 cause of death is also road accidents. When we get to the trucking side, the commercial side of this, there's over 10,000 accidents per year. So combined, 30,000 accidents per year in the United States. And to put this in context, this is about the same amount of accidents that were taking place in the United States in the 1950s. Think about the time span from the 1950s here to 2017 and all the advances that have taken place of having seatbelts and requiring seatbelts, automatic braking systems, adding airbags. Think about regulations, adding speed limits, adding drinking age minimums. So that's all occurred during that 65-year plus period, and yet we're still looking at this outrageously high number of deaths. And you know, at that point, we should be nauseated. So the system that we've been running for the last 40, 50 years is our young children at the age of 15 or 16 go to a driver's ed program. And after passing a written and a brief road test, they are given a driver's license and they're set out on the road. They might get some infringement, maybe a ticket or something, and that would require them to go back and maybe do some additional training to try to get points off their license or keep their insurance from going sky high. But at the end of the day, they're just kind of left to their own to start driving out in the roads. As far as commercial driver license, you can now obtain one of those in as short as a 4 to 6 week training course. And then you are set out as a commercial licensed driver to go out on the roads and make your field service calls and make your deliveries. So all the while, you know, all these commercial fleets have at least started investing in some kind of driving tracking mechanisms like we were talking about at OmniTrax. And so at least there's some software and some basic safety training that has been put into the commercial field. But when you look further into the statistics, less than 12% have any kind of ongoing driving safety program, and the vast majority of them don't have any type of driver behavior intelligence. So according to the Governor Highway Safety Association, 11 states so far have put in legislation specifically defining what is aggressive driving. Basically, that's defined as a combination of dangerous, reckless, or hostile behavior. It's a little bit different in the different states. So a firm by the name of SmartAsset did a study to determine which were the 10, or actually the 50 states, and they ranked them, but this is showing you a graphic of the top 10. So right here where we are today in the state of Texas is in the top 10. You see quite a bit down in the southeast, and of course in the northeast corridor. And keep in mind that's per 1,000 drivers, so it doesn't mean there's not an awful lot of accidents and things occurring in places like California and New York, but it's just a lot higher population. So the way they did that, they used a four-metric methodology. They took the percentage of insured drivers from the Insurance Research Council, the DUIs per 1,000 drivers in those states from the Federal Highway Administration, and then the deaths per 1,000 drivers from accidents from the National Highway Traffic Safety. And they also added on to that one more metric to see how many people were Googling driving tickets. So it's not just the United States. This is pervasive. This is a worldwide, global problem. And if you look at the heat map that I have up on this slide, you'll see countries like Asia and the Middle East and Africa and South America have even worse death rate percentages than the US. This is per 100,000 inhabitants. And in the heat map, the orange and red colors represent the countries that have the worst death rates. So, to address this huge problem, a couple years ago, some former Qualcomm data scientists and some research analysts and data analytics engineers set off on a journey to see if we could address this problem and look at the IoT advances that were out there to develop a solution that ultimately would help save lives. So the goal is to collect data and then transform that data into performance telematics data into a contextual aware analytics platform that would provide insight into how and why people drive the way they do. And at the end of the day, hopefully empower better driving behavior and better decision making. So when you look at contextual behavior, it requires three elements. You take the sensor output and you extract the behavior data, and we're looking across aggressive and distraction, and then we take that and you want to score that data. But there's some inherent problems and complexities that come in with motion behavior data. First, the sensor input comes from multiple different hardware sets, hardware sensors. And even if you take the same sensor and you put it in a vehicle, you'll get noisy data, and it doesn't exactly match up, so it needs to be calibrated. And then if you look at behavior data, that's also complex. Let me give an example. You're driving down the road and you hit a pothole, so that throws up some data. Or you're driving down the road and you hard brake. Now to differentiate, was that a pothole or a hard brake, it becomes very complex because you're just looking at the data. And of course, the third thing and layer on that is context. And context matters when you're looking at driving behavior. What I mean by context is, are you driving during the day or are you driving at night? Are you driving in a hilly area or are you driving in a flat area? Are you in a city or in a highway environment? What's the weather conditions? Was it raining out? Was it snowing out? Is it clear weather? So these are all factors that you want to take into consideration so you can get a better driver behavior analysis. So what we did at Tourmaline Labs is we said, let's look at the most distributed sensor out there right now. And of course, that's the mobile phones, the mobile device. And what's happened in behavior is almost all of us do not leave our phone. We take it with us on most every trip we go. It's in our pocket, and it's right next to us. So as we looked at how we're going to collect all this data, we decided that this would be the best way to go to market. But as you know, there's hundreds of different device models, and they have hundreds of different sensors in them. So we knew there was a lot of rich data that could be pulled out of these smartphone devices. And there's a remarkable potential to get driver detection from acceleration to braking and other elements, potentially even crash. However, the big issue is battery drain. So when you start using all these sensors, they tend to have a battery drain. So if you think about some of the mapping type of programs you might have run on mobile apps when you're driving, if you run it over an extended period of time, it tends to drain down your battery. So the challenges with the sensors, we look at getting the best pitch and roll and yaw, the X, Y, and Z axis, actually comes from the gyroscope. But the gyroscope tends to be expensive, and it drains the battery heavily. So the other sensor that is in many of the devices is an accelerometer sensor. So what we determined to develop on is how do we take this 50-cent sensor, this accelerometer, and make it act more like an $80 sensor so we can get good motion data and good motion behavior without having the hefty drain on the battery. And so that's what these research engineers had been programming here for the last 2.5 years. And then we determined that we have to take that data once we collect that and create a scoring platform around that. So this is where the machine learning comes in, artificial intelligence and biometrics. The platform I'm showing here, you pull in the sensor data, and then you have to clean, filter, and calibrate that data. Otherwise, the data is going to be biased and not going to give you a good score. And then we use machine learning methods from that data to learn, classify, and extract that data. And then we contextualize and normalize and localize it. And what I mean by localize is once we started looking at the data sets, we saw that there's inherent driving differences in Brazil than there is here in the US, than there is in Germany. And even regionally, people drive different here in Texas than they maybe drive in New York or Florida or California or Kansas. So we came out with a mobile app and have gone to market with that. That's commercialized. And we have white labeled that, so it'll be under many other brands. And that has been commercialized back in 2016. If you go back to the web management center behind that, we built the scoring dashboards, reporting with intuitive hover type messages and click and drill down. And you could do that per driver, per trip, or a specific score element. And then the dashboard provides toggle graphics, so quick visual analysis. And anybody that's traded stocks has probably used something like this as kind of a dynamic console. So behavior scores would include handling, focus, eco, which is your fuel use, acceleration, braking, turning, swerving, jerking. And of course, if we have it in the phone, we can capture phone handling as well. So in addition to the mobile phone apps, we have activated pulling data now from hardware and dongles and embedded devices that are out there. And we were just recently at CES and been approached by quite a few auto OEMs, Tier 1 and Tier 2 suppliers, as well as mobile network operators. So when you're looking at changing habits, it's hard for human beings. First, we have to measure the traits, and we look at routine, reward, and reminder. And the routine is how you're driving now, so we can monitor that. Then we can tailor and customize and localize that data. And then the reward, is this benefiting you from the gain of the habit? In other words, I'm trying to get there very quickly, or is there the risk assessment? Is there a danger in me trying to get there quickly? And of course, once it's been adopted, our customers take it out to their populations, and fleet insurance companies are adding their own positive reinforcement type of program. So reward programs could be anything from discounts to employee recognition. Best drivers of the month maybe get some kind of Starbucks card or some kind of gift card. And then, of course, there's the reminders. You have to provide meaningful risk, cost, benefit scores, and ultimately that will lead to conditioning of behavior. So from contextual behavior intelligence, we've launched 3 products, the TL Kit, TL Behavior, and TL Coach. And what we did is really extracted this and said, look, that platform now can take in data from other sensors besides phones. So by opening up APIs and creating SDK kits, we've allowed this to be pulled into other mobile applications, but also on the back end for the APIs, we've allowed these hardware providers that have already collected a lot of data out there with fleet dongles and other types of collections to bring that data in, and then we could use our scoring platform to give them the cleaned up and calibrated score. And next month, we're launching the final component to this that I think about as so important, which is the training component. So internally, we've had the debate, should that be an in-app type of an alert, or should that be outside of that? Well, since we're talking about phone handling, distracted driving, right now we have determined that we're going to go with an email. So this will be a weekly email that goes to those fleet drivers or to those consumers. It could come in a monthly or weekly. And it will give scores of how they're performing in their driving across all those behaviors, and then it'll look how you're performing within a population if you're in a fleet, and then it'll give you tips on how to improve, and of course it'll highlight where you can use the most improvement. And this coaching piece also opens an opportunity because it's another piece of engagement you're having with your employee or your fleet or with a consumer. So at the bottom of these emails, they can be crafted for other commercial announcements. So to wrap up, sorry about that. One of the largest contributors, we think, to the growth of the accidents that are growing here in the U.S. is distracted driving. One experiment we've asked people to do, if you just close your eyes for 5 seconds, imagine that you're driving on a road. Maybe it's in Arizona in the desert and there's not a lot of things around you. Now do that same thing in a city environment. Close your eyes for 5 seconds as you're driving down the road and you've got bicycles, you've got cars, you've got pedestrians. The average person that looks down to text is spending 4 to 5 seconds looking down the phone. So practice that once, and I think you'll get the idea real quickly that distracted driving is a huge problem. So the U.S. Department of Transportation is leading a big Stop Distracted Driving effort. Since 2009, I think they've had 2 large national distracted driving summits. But you know, one of the things we've come to realize is real important is if you do get this into phones, you can at least capture the phone handling, and that means you're picking up and using it too much. So looking to the future, to close out, when we look at statistics that are outside of the United States, we find that over 70% of the accidents and deaths are not in 4- and 18-wheel vehicles. It is actually in 2- and 3-wheel vehicles. So we're talking about mopeds, motorcycles, Vespas, scooters, rickshaws, tuk-tuks, apps, all these other forms of transportation, which really don't have a place to plug a dongle in, by the way. But guess what? We found out a lot of these people still have phones. So interestingly enough, we're starting to think about, hey, if we can have motion behavior intelligence, then it should be able to use across different transportation modes. And of course, being out of CES, we saw a lot of drones that are like, hey, we've got motion behavior too. So as we look to the future, we'll think about how we can utilize a motion behavior intelligence platform and where that might take us. So thank you for your time today. And I have my LinkedIn address up there, linkedin.com/in/Newkirk. Please do send me an invite. And my contact information is on the screen if you have more questions, because I think we're running short on time and we'd like to invite the next speaker up. And I don't want to take up too much of his time. Thank you.